Thank you. It's great to be here in this beautiful city. In this beautiful city, talking about cities. And cities is something interesting because, you know, until recently, 100 years ago, we only had 200 million people living in cities. And now we got about 3.5 billion people living in cities. But within the next 30 or 40 years, we're going to have 7 billion people. So we're going to have a challenge, but also an opportunity. But we need to decide, how do we want to live? How are we going to do those cities? How are people going to get around? How are the schools, the playgrounds? So that is a very clear trend that is happening in the next few years. Something else, a second trend that is happening, is that we're living longer. Much, much, much longer. Can you imagine the people that have ever lived to 65? In the history of humanity, half are alive today. Half. It's quite interesting. Actually, here we got the life expectancy on this, and this is income. Let's focus on life expectancy. Just 180 years ago, all of these are the countries in the world. 180 years ago, we didn't have any country that had a life expectancy above 45. Today, we don't have any that has a life expectancy below 45. This is great. In so many ways, actually, I think the biggest waste of resource in New Zealand, I live in Canada and everywhere, are the older adults. People retire, and we cross them out as if they had died. Except that they got 20, 30, 40 years left, and they are healthier and wealthier and more active and more knowledgeable and more travel. And they could be fantastic resources to our cities. They could be tutoring kids in the schools. They could be teaching yoga or Tai Chi in the parks. They could be teaching English to the immigrants. Because it's not about retirement. I think more than retirement, it's about rehirement. People want to do so many. Our universities should be at least 20, 30% of the courses should be for older adults. People are hungry of knowledge. People want to learn about gardening and about music and about history and philosophy and all kinds of activities. In the next 25 years in New Zealand, the population over 65 is going to double. And the population over 80 is going to quadruple. So these are two big trends. As we talk today about cities and cities for people. So I want to thank Ellen for the possibility to share some ideas. So I'm going to be talking about cities and creating vibrant cities and healthy communities. People are going to live happier with some emphasis on equity and public health. And then, but to put things into context, I'm going to talk a little bit about Bogota and 880 cities. And I'm going to end with 8 messages. Why Bogota? Well, basically, now I live in Canada, but in my previous life, I lived in Bogota. And obviously, it's not the ideal city. It's decades behind Wellington in every way. But however, I learned that it's not about the money. When I go to cities all over the place, people say, oh, we don't have the money, we don't have the budget. Are we going to do this for pedestrians? No, we don't have money. For walking, for cycle, for public. And also, I've been doing, now I advise many cities, but for some time I was on the other side, I was doing. For example, we did over 800 parks in 2 terms, in 2 administrations, in 6 years, over 800 parks. We built parks all over the city. One of them was this one. The Pope came here, gave a mass for 1 million people, and then he left and nothing happened. In 27, there were not even footpaths. The city put a wire fence, and then they planted some trees, but nothing happened in almost 27 years. Why almost nothing happened? Because change is hard. Change is hard everywhere. Because when you try to change, the cave people show up. Who are the cave? They are the citizens against virtually everything. But I also learned that the citizens pay us every other week is to get things done, not to have 20 excuses why things cannot be done. So we got to become champions at finding solutions to the problems, not at finding problems to the solutions. And that's how it was like this for 27 years. And then in 4 years, we turned it into the nicest park for recreation, for sports, for cultural activities, for passive, for active, things that people can do at their own pace and their own time. It's so great, and the uses and the activities. By the way, the parks, is not the successful parks is not so much about the design, but it's more about the uses and the activities. I find that in most cities around the world, it's easier to find the millions to do the parks than to find the thousands to make it work. But if we want parks to work, we gotta have those thousands. And again, it's not just about big parks. People say, should we have big parks or small? We gotta have a combination. We gotta have small parks. We need to have neighborhood parks. The neighborhood parks are critical because that is where we develop that sense of belonging. That's where we meet the parents of our children's friends. But we're not going to be able to play rugby there, so we need the medium-sized parks. And then we need to have city park systems so that we got the small, the medium, the large, we got active, we got passive, we got contemplative. Something else that I did is I found a very small program called Ciclovia with a few kilometers and a few thousand people. And we turned it into the world's largest pop-up park. What is it? Sunday mornings, we pop it up. And people come out, they walk, they bike, they skate, they run. We connected the whole city. All of the colors are the different income levels. I wanted to make sure that all income levels were connected. How do we do it? It's simple. We open streets to people and we close them to cars. And magic happens. And people come out every Sunday of the year and every holiday. It's not an event. It's not like Independence Day. Nope. It got to be every week so that we get all of the health benefits and environmental benefits. But since not everybody wants to walk or bike or skate, so along the road we do aerobics, we do Tai Chi and yoga and cha-cha-cha and all kinds of activities. But everything is about physical activity. And it's something that is great, and I've seen it work. It's like a positive virus that has spread all over the world in cities of 10,000 people, 100,000, 500,000, 20 million like Mexico City. Who comes? Everybody. All you really need is 2 feet and a heartbeat, and then you have fun. And you come out, and it's great. Young, old, rich, poor, fat, skinny. Anybody. We get over 1.5 million people every Sunday on holiday. And if the weather is quite nice, we might go to 1.8, 1.9 million. And this is great because not only for recreation, but it changes minds. All of a sudden, we realize that the streets are not just to move cars, but that the streets are public places. And it's about social integration, everybody mixing. It's probably one of the few places in our cities where we meet each other as equals. All of a sudden, the wealthiest persons of the city and their spouses and children are doing the same activity as the poorest people in the city and their spouses and their children. That is very powerful. Also, 280 kilometers of bikeways. In 3 years, 280 kilometers. And went from a few thousand to about 500,000 people cycling, always separating pedestrians and cyclists. And something that was interesting as we were building the network is that most of it was in some places that here in Wellington is almost impossible to imagine the level of poverty. Even in your nightmares, look at the level of poverty. By the way, why do we need good footpaths? Why do we need good cycleways? Part of it is because it's going to be safer, but just as important because we need to dignify the pedestrians. We need to dignify the cyclists. And that is as important as the safety itself. And when I'm talking about people walking, I'm talking about anybody that is moving at the speed of the pedestrian, people on wheelchairs, people on walkers, and so on. But now I run 2 organizations. One is World Urban Parks and the 880 cities, and I've been lucky to have worked in more than 200 different cities. World Urban Parks, it's an interesting place to network, to share. Our vision is a world where people value and have easy access to good quality parks. And we have a lot of information on the website, worldurbanparks.org. And when I go to any city, always people say, Gil, what is these 880 cities? Well, I said 880 cities is not about walking or cycling. It's not about parks or footpaths or streets. Those are the means, not the end. The end is how can we help to create vibrant cities and healthy communities where people are going to be happier, enjoying their parks, their public places, their footpaths. But always people say, is this intersection safe? Can I send my children walking to school? Can I send my grandparents walking or cycling to the park or to get eggs or milk? Well, you don't have to be a transportation engineer. 3 simple steps. We call it the 880 rule of common sense. Unfortunately, common sense seems to be the least common of the senses. 3 steps. Step number 1, think of an 8-year-old that you love. Can be your son, your daughter, your grandchild. Someone that you love. And once you have that 8-year-old in your mind, step number 2, think of an 80-year-old that also you love. Your parents, your grandparents, brothers, sisters. And once you have the 8-year-old and the 80-year-old, go to step number 3. Would you send them across that intersection? Would you send them walking or cycling to the park, or to take public transit, or to buy eggs or milk? Would they feel safe? If you worry, it's because he's safe enough. If you would not, it's because he's not, and we gotta do it better. What if everything that we did in Wellington, the footpath, the crosswalk, the school, the hospital, the plaza, the park, everything had to be great for an 8 and an 80. It's not 8 to 80, it's for an 8 and an 80 as an indicator species. Because if it's good for the 8 and it's good for the 80, it's going to be good for everybody from 0 to over 100. We need to stop building cities as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic. And create great cities for all. That is the concept of 880 cities. It's simple but powerful. But we got to do it fast because we are going through a situation of an emergency. We got population growth, we saw, but not only all over the world, we're also having it here. Wellington itself is going to grow in the next 30 years by about 25%. And the mayor was just telling me that it's going to be even higher than this. And also when we say that people are living longer, it's not only around the world, but it's also here. People are living much longer. We're going to go in New Zealand for about 500,000 to over 1 million in 20 years. People are living longer, and that's great news. Actually, if we had been born in New Zealand 150 years ago, the life expectancy was 34. Imagine in the history of humanity, we reached 34 years as life expectancy. Now it's over 80. It's exciting. We have more than double the life expectancy. It's very clear that we have learned how to survive. But when we see the issues of climate change and congestion and public health crisis, mental, physical, congestion, and so on, it's clear that now we need to learn how to live. And that is part of the role of all of us, is learning how to live. So each one of us has to decide what kind of role. In many ways, we got to recreate cities. And like Einstein said, we cannot solve problems by using the same kind of thinking that we used when we created them. So I'm going to go through 8 different messages in Wellington. First one, change is hard. Sometimes people say, oh, change, but change is hard. Everywhere, not only here. Doing more of the same is easier. That's why sometimes cities don't change enough, is because, it's a lot easier to do more of the same. But we got to keep in mind that not only must do things right, but also we got to do the right things. What is the difference? Doing things, if we have a street that doesn't have a footpath, and we are doing it right, then we are just maybe doing it cheaper or faster. But that is not doing the right thing. We are still doing the street without footpath. So we got to do it right, but we also got to do the right thing. And changes, for example, Copenhagen. Copenhagen didn't have any pedestrian streets 30 years ago. When they were going to do their first pedestrian street, my friend Gil, and I've been advising them for about 9 years, he told me, Gil, everybody was complaining. They said, oh, here, walking a pedestrian street, we have too many cars. And the weather is horrible. It's hot in the summer, it's cold in the winter, it rains all year. But the number one reason why they didn't want pedestrian streets, they said, it's not part of our culture. That's for the Italians. Because the Italians are loud and noisy and they like to be on the streets. But we are Danish, and the Danish are cold and quiet, and we don't go out. Now the Danish are more Italian than the Italians. They love their pedestrian streets in the rain, in the summer. This is City Hall in Copenhagen. They went from a car invasion to people places. More than 18 park kilos have been turned into people places, and now they walk and they bike, and people of all ages and in all kinds of weather. So when we're thinking about changing in Wellington, 3 suggestions. One is change is not unanimous. Sometimes we're going to make changes and we go, oh, but there is some concern. There will always be concern. If you want change to be unanimous, you have to water that down so much that it's not going to be change any longer. Another suggestion, the general interest must prevail over the particular. The general interest. For example, we have public transit. Maybe we got to have right away for buses. It's not democratic to have a bus with 80 people going behind a car with 1 person. If democracy works, it should have 80 times the right of space than a car with one person. And also, the third is when you say no to something, at the same time, you are saying yes to something else. So if you say, okay, we're not going to have parked cars and we're going to move for the cycle way. And people say, oh, no, don't do that. Okay, that's fine. You are saying no to the cycle way, but you're also saying yes to more sprawl. You're saying yes to more congestion. You're saying yes to more obesity and so on. So anytime you say no to something, and another recommendation for cities like Wellington, you got many good things going on. And actually, that is one of your biggest barriers, that you're already good. Sometimes it's harder to go from good to great than from bad to great, because when people are good, they're already good, we don't want to change. Don't be complacent. Don't be complacent. Let me show you some idea. I mentioned Copenhagen. Well, Copenhagen, already 41 out of 100 trips are done on bicycle. Here, it's about 3%. Copenhagen, 40, and it's not because they are poor, they have a higher per capita income. However, they're saying, okay, you know, we're at 41 and people go to work. I mean, in the rain, there's no such thing as bad weather. It's bad clothing. They put on the proper clothing. Sometimes even no clothing. But now they want to go to 50%. They say 41 is not enough. We want to go to 50%, no complacency. So some of the things they're doing, you don't have to wear spandex to bike. And they used to be their old public bike shares that were really heavy and bad. Now they got these new ones with GPS, and they are lighter. They are building more bikeways, separating the pedestrians and the cyclists and the cars at one level for the cars, 5 centimeters higher for bikes, 5 centimeters higher for pedestrians. So each one has their own space, and they are widening some that were narrow, and they are putting the traffic lights at the speed of the cyclists. So there's a green wave, not at the speed of the cars, and building bridges and building counters and making friends between walking and cycling and transit. Let me tell you about Victoria. Victoria is the size of Wellington in Canada. The mayor of Victoria said, I want an all ages, all abilities bike network. But she wants it now, in 4 years. So in the first 6 months, we did all the plans with her, doing a lot of citizen engagement, defining how to do it, where to do it. And now, in 6 months it was done, and now she got the budget and she's building it, and before the end of the first term, it's going to be built. All ages, all abilities, a 4A plan. Barcelona is a really nice city, and it's very nice walking. So people could be complacent and say, oh, well, very good for walking. 2 weeks ago, Barcelona said, has nice density, nice footpaths. And 2 weeks ago, they said, we're going to increase by 60% the pedestrian space. 60%, not 5%, not 10, 60. So they said, in our grid, we're going to allow the cars every third street. And the two in the middle are going to be for people walking. And they're in the process. So don't be complacent. In Wellington, if you are good, these cities are good, but they want to be even better. I know some of you might be saying, oh, but Gil, here in Wellington, we're different. We got nothing in common with Barcelona or Bogota or New York. We are unique. I know that you are unique. You are absolutely unique, just like everyone else. Every city is unique. This is not like on the computers, that the computers we copy and paste, but we can adapt and we can improve. So every image that I'm showing are things that we could do if we have an open mind. The other day, the mayor of Timmins, have you heard of Shania Twain? She's from this little city of 53,000 people. And she said, Gil, you got to come and see this park. And I said, okay, I'll go and see the park, but why? And she said, because 2 years ago, you came by and you talked about the pilot projects in New York. And I said, she got it. I was talking about pilot projects on the street of New York. And she didn't say, oh, I got nothing to do with New York. There are 8 million people. And no, she said, I'm going to have an open mind. Not to copy, but to adapt. And she said, pilot project. And she did a pilot park. She got some plants and closed the street and then brought out chairs and tables and music and people and created a pilot park. So this is the idea that I want everybody to have an open mind on some of this. and say, what can we do? What is useful and what is not? Number 7, equity. Equity is something that is critical in all cities. It's not about equality. The other day I saw a cartoon that is easy to understand. This is equality. That's not what we need. Some people are starting so far behind that they need 2 or 3 boxes. Others so far ahead that they don't even need a box. But equality, when we look at any city and we evaluate cities, we should evaluate cities by how well they treat the most vulnerable people. And the most vulnerable are the children, the older adults, the poor, the handicapped. And in many cases, we're not doing a good job. 3 weeks ago, I was working in Ohio, and I was telling me in the US, 13 million children live on the level of poverty. That's more than 1 in 5. Actually, I had a lunch in Christchurch 2 days ago, and so when I said this, someone Googled, I said, oh, Gil, in New Zealand it's not 22, it's 26%. It's 1 out of 4 kids. We need to work on those issues of equity. For example, if you are born in one part of this city, in Fresno, you're going to have 1 acre per 1,000 residents, while in other places, 5. You know, when I was in Ohio, geographical equity. We're building cities where, for example, here, if you are born in this part of the city, your life expectancy is 64. If you are born 13 kilometers apart, it's going to be 90. And I don't know what is worse, that this is happening, and it's not clear in every city. You go to Washington, you go to New Orleans. I don't know what is worse, that this happens or that people accept that this is normal. Oh, it's because these people are lazy. That's why they live to 65, to 55. No, this is horrible. And unfortunately, in the OECD countries, New Zealand is in the bottom third. So we need to work in some of these issues. When we're talking about walking, or, for example, equity on mobility. The people that have a car to get around are spending about 25% of their income on mobility. 25%. And most of it is not even moving the car, because you say, oh, the gas price. No, most of it is depreciation. You buy a car for $25,000, you sell it 3 years later for $15,000, so you spend $3,500 per year just on depreciation. And if it's low income, people are spending 40% of their income on mobility. If they walk, they bike, and they took public transit, they would be spending only 5%. 5%. It's as if people won the lottery, except that it's not 1 in 10 million, it's 1 in 1. So there is nothing that the governments could do to improve the quality of life of people that would have more impact than allowing people to downsize from 2 cars to 1 or from 1 to 0. If they want to have 3, 4, 5 cars, that's fine. But if they don't want to have, they should be able to. And also, that is going to be great for the economy, because if you are going to have $8,000 in your pocket this year and another the next year, another the next year, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the restaurants. You're going to improve your house, your basement, your garden. It's going to stay in the local economy. Instead of buying cars built in China or Mexico, it's going to stay in Wellington. 6, the parks, the footpaths, they are important. But it's not so obvious. I go to many municipalities and I show them these footpaths or these parks, and they say, Gil, go do some fundraising. But when I go to the same municipality and I show them a pothole, they go crazy about potholes. They think maybe a car is going to fall there. And the media plays into this. This TV station hire a woman, all she does, goes and measures potholes and has a section on the TV at 6 p.m. Tuesdays and Fridays about potholes. And the citizens, they get organized to pressure the government on potholes. And finally, when they take care of the pothole, elected officials and staff, they go and celebrate. So I said, even if a small pothole is so important, why? Maybe it's because when we take a look at our cities from the air, the biggest public space are the streets. And by public, I mean they belongs to everybody, young, old, rich, poor, who drives, who doesn't drive. So what are we going to do with the streets? The streets are between 20 and 40% of our cities. And if we take out whatever is private, it's between 70 and 90% of what belongs to everybody, of the public spaces. That's why maybe doing things like ciclovia or open streets is interesting, because it's about doing different uses according to the time of the day, day of the week of the year. So we need to rethink the concept of public space, the concept of parks, because they are critical. They're needed for so many things. So we got to think of the botanical gardens. Detroit is going through a redevelopment, and they're doing lots of parks to get people out, to get people re-engaged, to renovate sections. Some of these playgrounds are great. This one in Copenhagen, I love this tree. This skateboard park, not only because of the tree, but because it has a nice cozy area for parents and grandparents. Whenever we do a playground or let's do a nice place for the parents and grandparents so that they come and they want to come and sit and chat and socialize. Otherwise, they come with their grandchildren, and 5 minutes later, they are bored and they want to go home. And we need to have, people say big parks, small ones. We got to have parks like Piedmont or elevated like High Line or the Bean. But let's open our mind. We do so many things in the parks. There's sports events, and we go to the parks, and we watch the games in the parks. But it's not only not about sports. Also, the umbrella revolution in Hong Kong. The public places are great because they're like wonderful equalizers. People go to the public spaces, and everybody, no one cares who's rich, who's poor. Jesuit Charlie, it's everybody. And again, this is Rio now. 2 million people. But it wasn't during the World Cup. It was 3 months before. It was when the Pope went and had a mass, 2 million people. And it's not only about big public places, small places. You got stairs. All of a sudden, the stair, it changes. Imagine, for example, from the point of view of citizen engagement, each family paints one step and they put their initials. 5, play. We don't have play everywhere in Wellington. Wellington has to be the playability. Imagine you go to take the bus, and you can have this swing while the bus is coming. Or you have a small garden, and then you start playing. So the playability is something that is critical in our cities. And play is so very important. Because play for children is not just fun and games. Playing is learning. Playing is where children develop their muscle strength. That's where they develop their cognitive thinking, their language capabilities, concentration, coordination. That is where they develop a sense of belonging, and they develop friendships for life and so on. So we gotta have play everywhere. What if not only the Wellington of today, but including the 50,000 that are coming, they should have a park or a play area within a short walk, within 500 meters, every kid. So if there are some places where they don't have, we should be building parks to make sure that everybody has one within 500 meters. And some of you might be thinking, what if in some neighborhoods there are no parks? Well, eventually we gotta create space for one. But in the meantime, let's think what is public: the street, the footpath, the library, the school. New York did this 6 years ago, and they said they found a lot of park deserts where they didn't have a park within walking distance. So they went to the schools and they said, this horrible thing that you call a playground, which is pavement and a couple of hoops, will improve if and only if you open it to the community after 4 p.m. on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, and they turn it into this. Look at all these beautiful trees and green spaces. Green spaces is important because green spaces improve the attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. They didn't do just 1 or 2. They increased by 31% the playgrounds without buying 1 centimeter of land. They did it by turning 221 of schools from that to this. And if you don't have the schools, you might have a library, you might have a street, and you close it and you create the areas. 4, walk. Who came walking today? Oh, everybody almost. Great. The few that didn't also came walking, because I don't see any cars in this room. I don't see any buses. Every single trip begins and ends by walking. We are all pedestrians. That's how we were created. Just like the birds, they fly, or the fish swim, and the deer runs. People, we walk everywhere. And we walk, and we are so happy when we walk because we use all our senses. All of a sudden, we're walking, and we see the children playing, and we hear the birds singing. We go in front of a coffee shop, and we smell the aroma, and the adults, and the older adults, and people walk in the summer, and people walk in the winter, all the time. We walk, but you gotta be safe. It needs to be safe. Yesterday, people driving motor vehicles killed. Yesterday, 741 people walking. 741. That is more than 1 person every 2 minutes. This is according to the World Health Organization. This is not civilized. They are not accidents. They are incidents because they could be avoided. In Wellington, we should say we're going to have a vision 0. No deaths on the streets, none. No walking, no cycling, not in public transit, not in cars, nothing. And we're going to improve walking. The pedestrians have to be a priority. And in many places, they have not been a priority when we build footpaths like this one. Or when we allow the cars to park on the footpaths. We're telling these people, you are a second-class citizen. Every day we tell her when we have 3 lanes for the cars and we don't even have a footpath. We got to improve walkability. How to improve walkability? Very important, and I think that here in Wellington you are moving in that direction, is to have 30K speed everywhere. Not in one street, not in front of the schools. Why do we have 30K in front of the schools? Because it works. But do we want children to be safe just in front of the school or everywhere? If we have 30K, if you get hit by a car at 30, there's only 5% probability of being killed. At 50, it's more than 80%. And there are many, many studies that show the same in miles, in kilometers, all of them. But it's not only because it's going to be safer, also because many more people are going to walk. It's not an enjoyable walk when the cars are going by at 50 or 60, but when the cars are going at 30, it is. Also, like if we have a small island in a crosswalk, we eliminate more than half of the incidents in the intersections. Why are we still doing roads without a small island, crosswalks without islands? That's what I'm saying. It's not a technical issue. We got to do this, and we got to make it safer for the older adults. The people here in the intersections, the older adults are 3 times as many as the proportion of the population. It's not because they are listening to music too loud. We got to have a law, pedestrians first in Wellington. 3, about sustainable mobility. It's not only about walking, it's about cycling, it's about public transit, it's about new uses of cars. I'm not saying that this is the end of the car industry, but the way we use cars is changing very, very, very rapidly. In many places in North America, the young people, 18 through 24, in the last 3 years purchased fewer cars than any time in the last 40. Actually, they got fewer driver's license than any time in the last 40. The car is no longer a status symbol for young people. It's more of a status symbol, an iPad, or get a backpack and come to New Zealand, or pay higher rent and live in a walkable neighborhood than have lower rent and have to depend on a car. And now people say, oh, the driverless cars. Well, I think that if we don't change our behavior, this is what cities look like without driverless cars, and this is what they're going to look like with driverless cars. Nothing is going to change. Actually, things might get even worse because, many people are losing their driver's license when they get older. Well, in driverless cars, they're going to continue driving. Also, so if we want people to bike, walking and cycling is not a frivolity. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for most people. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for all children and youth. I go to some cities and people say, oh, here everybody drives. No, even in the wealthiest neighborhood of Wellington, if you're under 16, your only individual mode of mobility is to walk or to bike. That's why it should be a right, the right to safe and enjoyable mobility. Unless you think that only the people that have the money and the age and the desire to drive a car have a right to individual mobility. That's why we're also talking about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability, because everything is linked to everything. So if we're going to improve bikeability, it's not about putting shadows on the streets or putting up signs or bike parking or lockers or putting, none of this really improved. All of this, the maps and even in some places they're putting public bikes, bike sharing. That is like getting the saddle before the horse. This makes it nicer for the 2 or 3% that are already cycling. But if we want to increase the people cycling, there are only 2 things that really increase: to lower the speed in the residential areas and to create a network of protected bikeways. So everything that I said about 30K for pedestrians is equally for bicycles. But the network, we need to create a network of protected bikeways where the bicycles have a physical separation with the cars, as well as a physical separation with the pedestrians. And if we don't have the money or the political moment to do it permanent, like those ones in Montreal or these ones in Paris, then it can be temporary for 2 or 3 years. But don't just paint a line. Enhance the painted line by creating some kind of physical separation. But it has to be a network. If it's not a network, it's not going to click. Because if you don't bike in Wellington because you are afraid, but now 30% of the ride is going to be safe, but the other 70% still in the middle of the cars, it's not going to work. So once you decide you're going to do it, do a network, and then things will click. It has to be like the power network. We have a power network, we have a network for the water, we need to have a network for the bicycles. This is a city, the size, similar in size to Wellington owns. They did a plan, a mobility plan of walking, cycling, cars, everything. And they thought of people in the winter, in the summer, people are going to work, people are going to school, connectivity, creating a physical separation, different ways at different heights, or creating other ways, but always separating, putting up, counting the pedestrians, counting the cyclists, and putting up bicycle area. And it's a city that even has the public washrooms on the streets and underground parkings. Pedestrians are first, so when you're going to go to the pedestrian areas, either you leave your bike out or you walk your bike. And when you are going to the schools, in the schools, it's not 30K an hour in front of the schools. In front of the school, 0K an hour. There are no cars from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Only the people that live there. They shut down the street and they put ping pong tables and games so that the kids, they come early and they want. So it's about having fun for everybody. The quality of the infrastructure in the cities is a symbol of the respect that we have for people. And if we improve public transit, one of my brothers, mayor of Bogota, he says that the civilized city is not the one where the poor have cars. It's the one where the rich use public transit. This is critical. We need to have a public transit that is good enough for anybody. It's not for the low income. So we need to improve. The other day working with the mayor of Malmo said people have an issue with the buses. So since people had an issue with the buses, he said, Gil, what we did, we put a nose on the bus, we covered the wheels, and now they look like trains. And it's about improving, it's about dignifying. This cannot be the bus stop for people because then no one is going to change. So I tell, look at this other bus stop. People say, why are you showing me this bus stop? I say, maybe that's what the bus stop would look like if the decision makers use the bus service. Two, the community is the expert. We really got to improve. I just got to send, I got 3 minutes. So community is the expert. The citizens are the experts. We need to listen to them, honestly listen to the citizens on what is that they want. If I ask my daughter, what are we going to do in this park? She's going to say, Dad, let's do yoga. And in this other park, Dad, more yoga. I said, daughter, not everyone wants to do yoga in the park. Some people want to do a fire pit. Others want to have a pizza oven. Others just want to go and paint or run or do all other kinds of activities. But let's ask the citizens, and the citizens are going to have great ideas. Sometimes we are the citizens, give us some impatience and give us some orchids. What are the impatience? Are things we can do now in Wellington in the next 12 months. Low cost, low risk. One day a woman said, Gil, when I'm walking home, the footpath is very dark. I said, yeah, but putting light on the footpath is not low cost. She said, it's very low cost because when I'm walking home, the footpath is very dark, but the road it has a lot of lights. She said, the street don't need lights because the cars already have lights. All I'm asking is for someone to go up on the ladder, get the street on the light, turn it 90 degrees, and share it with the footpath. Same light, same post, same cable. The citizens are great, and then orchids. And one is the benefits. If we're going to promote sustainable mobility and parks and public places, we got to work on the benefits, and the benefits are about the environment, the economic activity, recreation, transportation. And I'm just going to click through these slides because the time is almost over. And is this what the future looks like? The issue of obesity is something that is critical. In New Zealand, 31% of the people are obese. And the people between 35 and 74, all of them above 30%. Look, it used to be only 10%. Things are getting worse. Now it's at 31. New Zealand is one of the 3 worst in the OECD, and we can work. If we work, part of it is the balance. We got to work on calories in and calories out, so we got to work in having gardens and having farmers markets and so on, but we got to be active. 60 minutes a day for children, 30 minutes a day for adults, and no better way to do it than on the footpaths, on the streets, on the parks, and making it easy for everyone. And there is all of this, we tend to think is good for physical health, but there is no health without mental health. So we gotta work. Depression is the world's #1 cause of disability. So contact with nature, we're gonna improve their mood, their cognitive attention. It's gonna lower depression, anxiety. We have close to green spaces. I'm just going to click through this because I'm going to go to the conclusion. Sorry, took longer. I know that we got some challenges, but more than challenges, I invite you to think that we have these wonderful opportunities. We got to think outside the box. These are not technical issues. These are not financial issues. These are political issues with the big P. Everybody has to participate. Everybody has to get involved. We need to create broad alliances. We got to get the elected officials at the municipal, at the provincial, at the national level. We got the public sector staff, and not only planners and transportation. Let's get public health, education, environment, everybody. And we got to get the community, the universities, the activists, the media, everybody. Just as an example that is not technical, we do lots of workshops with children. Children, we ask the children, for example, why don't you do a drawing? How would you like your community to be when you have your parents' age and you have children your own age? And people say, good, work with the children because they are the future. No, no, no. Work with the children in Wellington is because if we educate the children very, very well, they go home and they educate their parents. So here they were doing their drawings. This one is all green. This other one, he wrote, I want few cars and many people walking and many people cycling. And then he drew an area for pedestrians, for cyclists, for buses, and for cars. He's only 13. He don't know that we walk at 5 kilometers an hour. But he knows that if we mix pedestrians and cyclists, the pedestrian is going to get injured. If we mix cyclists and cars, the cyclist is going to get injured. So each one needs their own separate space. And then he drew public parks and low buildings with street-level activity. A few months after this, I was doing a workshop to the PhD students in South Korea, and I said, I hope you study very, very hard, because now the 13-year-olds can summarize urban planning 101 in one drawing. So years ago, we were not even talking about these issues. Now we're talking, but we need to move from talking to doing. So let's keep in mind that it's not about mobility or parks. It's about how to create a vibrant city with healthy communities where all people are going to live happier. I wish you much success. Thank you very much.